This brief history of Bass Lake is brought to you by the Starke County Historical Society, Knox, Indiana. Marvin Allen narrating. The history of Bass Lake for the white man goes back to 1834 when this area of Indiana was first surveyed and platted. At that time the area was Indian territory. It was 1838 before any early pioneers settled in Starke County. Around 1854 a few pioneers settled around Bass Lake. The Myers, Hayes, Connors, Pipers, Collins, Terrys, and Vergeens were among the first settlers. This is an 1884 map with roads or trails shown as dashed lines. You will notice that most of the lake did not have any sort of road around it at that time. We have added teepees to show the location of 3 Indian villages that were used up to the early 1800s. One was on the sand ridge between 450 South and the Golf Course Road. 2 others were on 700 East, northeast of the lake. The Bass Lake one-room school can be seen northeast of the lake on 400 South. The white school was located just northwest of the lake on 550 East. An 1898 map shows a very different lake. A road now runs around most of the lake. A town known as Winona has risen on the northeast corner. It even has a post office. Soon it would contain several grocery stores, a bowling alley, and a movie theater. In the early days of Cedar Lake, as it was known then, hunting and fishing clubs were about the only activity at the lake. Much of the shoreline was marshy and swampy. There was no controlling dam on the outlet then, and at times the lake was as much as 2 to 3 feet higher during wet years than today, and would have covered many of today's lawns. A scene around Bass Lake showing an early road. Back then a paved road and it had gravel on it, rather than just natural dirt or sand. Fred and Emma White's farm homestead was located on the present-day golf course. This same house was used as a clubhouse for many years. The Whites sold the farm in 1927 to developers who turned the old farm into a golf course. Much of the land that is now the golf course was cleared by Fred White and his sons using a team of oxen. An early postcard shows downtown Winona about 100 years ago. The street at that time was still a dirt road. The first Bass Hotel looked very much like a typical farmhouse, and may very well have been. The Braybrook Hotel was located on Cedar Point, and was first built as a Larimore Hotel in 1887. It was the first of several first-class hotels to be built around the lake. It had 50 guest rooms. A postcard showing ladies' bathing suits around 1915. Another postcard showing downtown Winona around 1920. Back then, men's bathing suits also covered up most of their bodies. It was the 1920s before men dared expose their chests at the lake. Sigmund Klopat operated a photo studio at the lake on weekends. Tintype photos were considered quick pictures back then. The first steamboat on the lake was the Vandalia in 1885. Tom Kemp brought the second steamboat, the Kokomo, to the lake in 1898. George Peterson built the Conradin, the Majestic, and the Letha May, shown in this photo. The Majestic was a double-decker and could carry 300 adults. However, the Majestic burned down in 1906. The Winona Cafe would have offered the then new ice cream cones to vacationers and tourists. The bowling alley at Winona can be seen in this early postcard. The Best View Hotel was another first-class hotel at the lake and was located at the site of today's showroom. Cleve's Chute offered fun for the adventurous. It was located at Winona. After automobiles became more common, taxis would pick vacationers up at the Knox or North Judson depots and carry them to the lake. The Bass Lake Fire Department practicing with their new fire truck sometime in the 1920s. Back in the 1920s, Bass Lake had a baseball team and played other local teams. This team was known as the Bass Lake White Sox. The Bass Lake Country Club was located on Cranberry Point. Later the building was part of Said White's Camp Gridley for young boys. Here a postcard shows the 11th green on the golf course sometime around 1928 after the golf course opened. The Hay House was another of Bass Lake's hotels. It was located on the northwest side. The Taggart Hotel was located near Cedar Point and offered fine dining and dancing to well-known big bands of the day. One of the stores in Winona was Cayley Brothers. It offered general merchandise. The Kaiserhof Hotel was also located in Winona, right on the lake. The Crystal Ballroom was one of the first places at the lake to offer dancing. It was built around 1927. Like the Taggart, it attracted well-known big bands and was very popular. Dan Russo and his orchestra were frequent entertainers at the Crystal Ballroom. The Taggart's dance pavilion was known as the Blue Dog. Van's Inn was located at the south end of the lake. It was very popular. Harry Rannells had the Bass Lake Park at the south end of the lake. It featured a merry-go-round. Lakeside Grocery or Royal Blue Store was a general store at Winona in the 1940s. Connor's Place at the southeast corner of Bass Lake offered all sorts of things for vacationers and tourists. Later it was known as Bloom's. It was on the site of today's Bass Lake Restaurante. Buckdaw's was located on Cedar Point in the former Braybrook Hotel's clubhouse. It had been built around 1887 by the Peru Fishing and Hunting Club. The Braybrooks used it as a card room and tavern. It also had billiard tables. The Starke County Historical Society's museum is open Tuesday through Friday, noon to 4 p.m. We are located at 401 South Main Street in Knox.